Hello everyone, and welcome to Sethaldor's World of Warcraft Guides. Today we are going to go over Protection Paladin Glyph setup. I'm going to attempt to cover PvE and PvP glyphing for Protection spec. Let's look at our prime glyphs first. First we have Crusader Strike, which will increase the critical strike chance of your Crusader Strike by 5%. Next we have Hammer of the Righteous glyph, which increases the physical and holy damage components of Hammer of the Righteous by 10%, causing a net increase of 20% effectiveness in this ability. Next we have Judgment, which causes your Judgment to deal 10% more damage. After that we have Glyph of Shield of the Righteous, which causes your Shield of the Righteous to do 10% more damage. Then we have Word of Glory, which causes your Word of Glory to do 10% more healing. And finally, we have Seal of Truth, which causes your Seal of Truth to grant you 10 more expertise while active. As for what to pick in a PvE scenario, if you find yourself doing boss tanking in situations where it's just the boss and you need to create as much threat as possible, you should grab Glyph of Crusader Strike. If you find yourself off-tanking, i.e. AoE tanking more often than not, then you're going to want to grab Glyph of Hammer of the Righteous to increase AoE damage, because that's what you'll be using in those situations. So be prepared to change that based on the pull or boss type, because some bosses do involve large amounts of adds. After that, I would highly recommend picking up Glyph of Judgment, because if you recall in the Prot tree, Wrath of the Lightbringer increased the damage Judgment does by 60%, coupled with this glyph causes it to be a total of 70%, which is excellent, especially with a 5-stack of Censure on it. And finally, I would recommend picking up Shield of the Righteous in a PvE environment for a glyph setup, because 10% more damage from a 3 Holy Power Shield of the Righteous is going to be a very painful thing for the boss you're slamming. As for picking up Word of Glory in a PvE environment, it is viable. However, you should select between Shield of the Righteous and Word of Glory, because they both run off of Holy Power, and it will be very difficult to fit both of them in, making one of those two glyphs not optimal because it would not be used. If you find yourself low on expertise or having trouble hitting the boss with parries and dodges as being the result, then Seal of Truth may be the thing for you, So, there's fudge room, but my recommendation would be, if you're a main tank single target tanking, Crusader Strike, Judgment, Shield of Righteous. If you're an off tank who finds himself AoE tanking more often than not, Hammer of the Righteous, Shield of the Righteous, and Judgment. Now, in a PvP environment, you're going to want to pick up Crusader Strike glyph. More often than not, you want to push out damage on a single target over everyone around you. However, there are situations where Glyph of Hammer of the Righteous would be more viable and more helpful to push up your numbers. The idea is you want to kill the guy you're looking at now. So Crusader Strike would be a better idea. Also, 10% more damage from Judgment is, of course, going to be excellent in a PvP environment. Hands down, no questions asked, self-explanatory. And then the last one is going to be between Word of Glory and Shield of the Righteous. If you recall from the large math equation from my specking guides in PvE and PvP Prot spec, we ended up with a total of 172% effectiveness from using Word of Glory at a 3-stack. Having this glyph would make it 182% effectiveness, therefore increasing the bubble and overhealing caused, allowing you to absorb more damage, and in the end increasing your survivability by 10% more than it was before this glyph. Increasing the damage of your Shield of Righteous by 10% is also a decent idea for pushing out more single target damage, as is the idea. However, between your Crusader Strike having 5% more crit and your Judgment doing 10% more damage, I think it's time to focus a little bit more on survivability in that case, in my opinion. Also, you'll see that the major glyphs will help you with single target damage as well. Speaking of major glyphs, let's move on to them. We have major glyph, the Glyph of Consecrate, which increases the duration and cooldown of Consecrate by 20%. We have Dazing Shield, which adds a daze effect to your Avenger's Shield. We have Divine Plea, which provides an additional 5% of your total mana in the same amount of time. We have Focused Shield, which causes your shield to hit 2 fewer targets but do 30% more damage. We also have the Ascetic Crusader, which reduces the mana cost of your Crusader Strike by 30%. Divine Protection, which causes your Divine Protection... Glyph of Divine Protection, which causes your Divine Protection to reduce magical damage instead of physical damage. We have Divinity, which doubles the mana restored from your Lay on Hands. We have Hammer of Justice, which increases Hammer of Justice's range by 5 yards. We have Holy Wrath, which now causes Holy Wrath to stun Elementals and Dragonkin. We have Long Word, which causes your Word of Glory to heal for 50% less up front, but provide a hot for 50% of the healing it would have done. So, first of all, let's talk about Glyph of Consecrate. This increases the duration and cooldown of Consecrate, but does nothing to its damage output. So you're doing 100% of Consecrate's damage in 120% of the time. Who in their right mind would ever pick this glyph for PvE or PvP? On top of that, if it weren't enough, making this take longer to replace makes it harder to grab a rogue by surprise, because if he sees it there for 10 seconds, he's not going to walk into it. If he sees it there for 12 seconds, what makes you think he's going to walk into it in those last 2 seconds? It'd be more viable to have it for 10 seconds and be able, for 30 seconds, pardon, and be able to replace it wherever you need to go. Now, in a PvE environment, this extended cooldown and duration has slightly more viability in some people's opinions. I find that it doesn't, because having it down for 10 seconds or 12 seconds does not change the fact that if the mob decides to move out of it because a hunter chooses to take aggro and you have to run off and pick it up, he's no longer in the Consecrate regardless of the extra 2 seconds, making you want to put it down somewhere else, which you no longer can. So, bad glyph all around, in my opinion. Next, we have Dazing Shield. Very good for a PvP glyph setup. Pretty much cosmetic for a PvE one. Dazing them doesn't make anything different. You're going to get up in their face anyways. Glyph of Divine Plea is excellent in a PvE environment, considering your Divine Plea no longer resets itself upon white hit like it did prior to 401. And in PvP, it's nice because you may find yourself without mana, and 5% more mana restored from that is 5% more mana you didn't have before. So, it's a good one to pick up. Focus Shield is more viable for either main tanking bosses, or if you want to really amp up your single target DPS in PvP, which is the case for me. As you'll see, I have it in this spec. It used to be increasing its damage by 100%, which it got nerfed. However, the overall damage output from Avenger's Shield got buffed with this patch, making it about the same output it was prior to 401. So I would take, for a PvP glyphing setup, Dazing Shield, Focus Shield, and Glyph of Divine Plea. For a PvE setup, I would take Divine Plea. If I'm main tank, I would grab Glyph of Focus Shield. And I suppose I would pick up anything I really felt like at that point. Divinity, perhaps, because I use my Lay on Hands for a mana battery. Finally, Miners, pretty much absolutely useless as usual. The only one you need to have is Lay on Hands. As for the others, just pick your favorite seal and your favorite blessing, throw them in the last 2 slots, and you'll be set for Miners. That has been Paladin Protection Glyph setup with Sethaldor, the Paladin of the server Blade's Edge in the Guild Sacrilege. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Please leave feedback in the comment section below or in the form of a thumb up or thumb down. Let your friends know of my videos, and please keep watching. Thank you very much, and I can't wait to see you all again.